What's up, people? Good Tuesday morning. Hope you guys are doing good. And I'm thinking about something as it regards the NFL right now. I'm thinking about something that is happening this year. You probably already heard some people talk about this a little bit. You probably read some articles where people discuss it. But the name of the game in the NFL right now seems to be parity. There's a lot of parity right now. There doesn't feel like there's a lot of dominant teams at the top. Maybe there's and then a lot of teams are just kind of within the same tier as each other almost. We have one undefeated team through 6 weeks, and we have zero winless teams. And that's the part that I want to focus on for this video because this is where things kind of become ultra appealing as a Seahawks fan. And by the way, the fact that there's parity at the top of the league is actually helping the Seahawks as well. It's making it a little easier for them to actually get in this playoff race, I think. But I want to talk about it from the other perspective here and get to a appealing point. When you look at the NFL most years, you usually see at least a few teams that are just really, really bad. That it just kind of feels hopeless from week to week. Like, how are they ever going to win more than 3 or 4 games? Like, you just look at them and you know this team's ceiling is 4 wins. It's not one of those bad teams that might win 7. No, this is a really bad team. And most years have at least one team that is just completely offensive to football, where it seems like, how are they going to win a single game? And usually what happens is those teams at the end of the year win a few games because they've had a chance to cycle through different philosophies or players, and eventually they find something that works a little bit, and they've got nothing to lose at the end of the year, and their opponents taking them lightly, they win a few. Like, two great recent examples of this are the 2019 Miami Dolphins. I remember when the season started, a lot of people thought that this Dolphins team might not have a game be within 2 touchdowns the whole season. They might not have a single game even close. And the first month of the year was some of the worst football you've ever seen. People thought this team was genuinely tanking. Now, by October, they were playing a little bit better, and then November hit, and that was the Ryan Fitzpatrick year where he came in and actually drove them to some pretty notable success for the rest of that season. They ended up going 5-11. They had a winning record in their last 9 games. But this was the team that started the year looking like they were just an offensive affront to football in 2019. 2020, we had the Jets. This team would end up going 2-14, so they pretty much held to it. But they kind of followed the same pattern where they were bad. Most weeks, it wasn't even a contest. Most weeks, not only did they lose, but they were getting blown out. A lot of 2-score games. You had to get all the way down to late October for them to even have a game that was a 1-score game. You had to get to mid-November for them to even be truly in a game. And by late December, they actually managed to squeak out a couple. They beat the Rams. They beat the Browns kind of out of nowhere to actually cost themselves the #1 overall pick because Jacksonville got it this year. They were another team that was, the worst of the worst. But this Jets team is a great example of one of those teams that I'm talking about where it just feels completely hopeless. And like I said, most years you're going to see a few teams that look really, really bad, and I'd say one team that looks completely just an affront to football. And I look at the league this year, I'm not getting that sense. I look at most of these teams, the vast majority of these teams, and I see wins can realistically happen the rest of the year. I don't see a team that's like, oh, that's a 3-win team at most, or oh, that's a team that'll be lucky to win a game, or I don't see these 5 teams that I think are all going to win 4 or fewer games. That's not the sense that I'm getting, and that parity at the bottom of the league makes that Denver Broncos draft pick all the more appetizing. And let's walk it through here, okay? Let's walk it through. Let's start with the Houston Texans. As of right now, I think if there's one team you can make an argument for being really, really bad this year, like the team that will probably win like 3 games, that feels like they're just going to, go through the motions for a season, get their 3 wins and tap out, it would be the Houston Texans. Right now, they're the best bet, but even them, you look at this schedule so far. Do you see a completely awful team? Do you see a team that needs to be completely purged at the end of the year for incompetency? Do you see a team that needs to be sent back to the NCAA like they do in the Premier League in soccer? I see close games. I see competitive games. Even when they get beat badly, they're showing up. They're putting on a show. They're putting up a fight. They kept close with the Las Vegas Raiders for a good chunk of that game last week, and then it got away from them a little bit at the end. They lost to Chicago on a last second field goal. They held a fourth quarter lead against Denver. Like this Houston team, they may end up with the number one overall pick this year because, yeah, their ceiling is kind of low. They have issues. But this is a team that already has a win and a tie. And, I don't want to just use the win loss records to make my point here, but I think that's a great way to really kind of sum up what I'm seeing. Every team in the league, after 7 or 6 games, has at least one win, and only one team has only one win without a tie. Usually you see at least one team get to like 0 and 5, 0 and 6, 0 and 7, 0 and 8. Just some bottom feeder. We don't have that this year. Even Houston, who I do think is probably the worst team in the league right now, and currently I would make them the favorite to be the number one overall pick, they're not terrible. You look at these other teams that only have 2 wins right now, that are currently sitting on 2 wins, like the Detroit Lions. You can't tell me this is a completely awful team. They've just got injuries. When they were healthy, they were in a dogfight with Philly. They beat Washington. They should have beaten Minnesota. They put up 45 on the Seahawks with a bunch of injuries. Last 2 weeks, okay, it's gotten away from them, but I think this is very clearly a Detroit Lions team that when they get some of their guys back is going to have a chance to win several of these games. They got the Bears twice. They got the Panthers. They got the Jets, and we'll see what the Jets are after the injuries they suffered a couple days ago. Jaguars are still not good. Excuse me. There's going to be a few wins here, I think, and maybe even a win or two you're not expecting. That's another element of this, by the way. A lot of these bad teams play each other, so somebody has to win, right? You got the Carolina Panthers. Now, about 48 hours ago, I thought the Carolina Panthers had the number one pick in the bag. I thought they were blowing it up to tank. They got rid of their coach. They were starting their fourth string quarterback. They were getting rid of one of their best players on offense. It was like, okay, Carolina is going 1-16. They don't even care. They're not even really going to do anything more than go through the motions and half-ass effort the rest of the year, right? Wrong. The 1-16 dream is done. All right? And they did it beating down a playoff team from last year, Tampa Bay. So now I can't say that about Carolina, right? 48 hours ago, the Panthers probably would have been a team that you would have looked at and said, yeah, they're going to be lucky to win 3 games. They're going to cap out at 4. They're looking at like a 2-15 or a 3-14, one of those. I don't think you can say that now. They're still probably going to lose a lot of games, but Atlanta looks very suspect on their defense right now. Maybe Carolina can take advantage. Carolina does have a pretty good defense. They've got a home game against Denver, who looks like a bottom feeder right now. They've got games against Pittsburgh. They've got a game against Detroit. The Saints don't look good so far. They already kicked the crap out of Tampa Bay once, I guess. Like, there are going to be opportunities here for them to win games, and if they play with the same kind of drive they did against the Buccaneers, they may win several more games this year, and they're not bailing out. You keep going down the list. New Orleans, okay, New Orleans, they have their picks sent to Philly, but this is a team that has aggressively gone in to try to win as much as they can this year. And you look at most of their games so far this year, yeah, it's not good. A lot of these games are close. A lot of these games are competitive, though. They played the Bengals tough. They played the Vikings tough. That game literally lost by a matter of inches. They still have talent. They have a lot of injuries right now. They're going to get some of these guys back. Winston, Michael Thomas, Andrews Pete. I think Lattimore is injured right now. They're still playing teams like the Raiders, the Steelers, the Cleveland Browns, Carolina at the end of the year. There's some wins here, right? This is not a team that's just going to pick up another win the whole rest of the year and call it good. Cleveland Browns. An offense this good should find a way to some wins. And I mean, if you look at the schedule so far this year, they almost every game they play is close, right? Like they really should have beaten the Jets. That game was a fluke. They were toe to toe with Atlanta, toe to toe with Baltimore. They missed a field goal to lose to the Chargers. This is a Cleveland Browns team that has enough offense to win a few more games later this year. They've got a game against Houston. They've got a game against New Orleans. They've got a game against Washington, Pittsburgh. There are, yeah, I look at them and I go 5 wins, at least 5 wins, especially when Watson gets back. Okay, next you have the Steelers. They're picking currently in the top 10. They're a 2-win team. Do you really want to bet on Mike Tomlin's Steelers to completely bottom out? That's not what they do over in Pittsburgh. That's not what Mike Tomlin does. He finds a way. It's not pretty, it's not desirable, but it's better than worst in the league. He finds a way. And I mean, you look at the schedule so far, what they've done, a lot of close games. They beat Tampa Bay, which was, at the time, it seemed like a big skin on the wall. They lost that crazy back and forth game to the Jets. Played very close with New England. You look at the remaining schedule, there are a couple of soft teams in there, like what are the Colts going to be from here on out? You've got the Saints. Maybe the Falcons are going to be a team like that, depending on where their defense goes from here. Carolina, Cleveland again. A lot of these teams are just going to knock L's around within those schedules. They're not going to win all these games. They won't even win most of these games, but they can win some. Because no one team is so much worse than every other bad team that it's obvious that one team's just going to get steamrolled whenever they meet in that kind of round robin format. You got the Jaguars. The Jaguars, they looked good back in September, honestly. They looked like a good team. And ever since they lost that game to Houston that they had no business losing, they've been a little harder to take seriously, but they're still playing close games every week. Pretty much, right? And they've got this big game coming up on Sunday, 6:30, which I've been thinking about streaming, by the way, against the Broncos. That game may end up deciding the number one overall pick, along with the Panthers-Broncos game. They got the Raiders. I don't think the Raiders are particularly good. They've got, like, the Lions. They've got the Jets. They've got the Texans. So, going to be a few opportunities to cash in wins. We know that the Jaguars like to... we know that this Jaguars team has at least some real potential on defense, and I think they're relatively well coached. So I just feel like there are going to be a few wins in there as well. Even a team like the Raiders that started 2-4, and obviously they're not where they need to be. This is clearly a decent team. Huge fluke that they lost that Cardinals game. They played very tough against the Chargers, the Titans, and the Chiefs. Very competitive games. Now, their 2 wins are against 2 awful teams, Denver and Houston. I understand that, but this team has too much talent to be a bottom feeder. This team has enough talent to win at least 5 or 6 games. And you look at the schedule, you can start stacking them up. They've got the Saints, they've got the Jags, they've got the Colts, possibly with Sam Ehlinger. They've got the Steelers, they've got the Broncos again. So you're stacking up at least a couple of wins on almost all of these schedules. And why this is interesting to us is because we can dream very big with this Broncos pick. Because anything is on the table, is what I'm trying to get at. Normal years, you would have that one team that looks so bad, you would, even as holding Denver's pick as they're completely falling apart, you would still say, okay, there's a wall, and Denver's not going to be bad enough to get past that wall. There's going to be like some combination of maybe 2 teams that look like they're the complete bottom feeders in this league, maybe 3 or 4 other teams that just look much worse than Denver just because Denver has this really good defense, maybe the best defense in the league. But that's not the case. This year, every team looks at least somewhat redeemable. So Denver's really good defense is not a guarantee that they don't pick in the top 3. And we've already been over their schedule, right? They get Carolina. They get Vegas. I don't really know what Vegas is going to be at this point. This Jacksonville game, it's softer than you might have... it's not as soft as you might have thought, but it's still somewhat soft. But then you've got this brutal gauntlet to end the season. LA, KC twice, Baltimore, even Arizona. Like, not a lot of potential wins in here. I'd say of all the teams we just went over, they have by far the fewest potential wins. So as of right now, there's no reason to not dream big as a Seahawks fan and wonder, are we getting the number one overall pick out of this? Like, dead serious. Who is so guaranteed to be better than Denver for the rest of this season? Who? I'm sorry, worse than Denver for the rest of the season. Better at losing than Denver. I don't see it. I don't see that one team that jumps out to me anymore. I thought it was going to be the Panthers. But yeah, no. You got to take them seriously for at least a month here after what they just pulled. I thought maybe it was going to be Houston, but they're scrapping. They're fighting in there every week to make the games competitive. And when you play football like that, odds are good that you're eventually going to just find your way to a win just because you keep all the games close. So yeah, this is probably going to be one of those years. I'm going to guess this right now. I feel like whichever team gets the number one overall pick is going to be a team with 4 wins. You're not going to have any 1-win, 2-win, 3-win teams. Whoever gets the top pick is going to be a team that goes 4-13 or 4-12-1. So with that in mind, that Denver pick, I know that a lot of people are saying, oh, we're going to get a top 10 pick. Some people are starting to turn on to the idea of like, oh, we're going to get a top 5 pick. I think we can dream a little bit bigger, guys. It is very realistic, very possible. I don't think it's a reach at all to say this Denver pick has a very realistic chance of hitting number 1 overall and giving us our pick from that 2023 draft class. So I'm going to do more draft content probably sometime next week because so many things are now available to us as Seahawks fans that maybe we didn't consider earlier. Like a month ago, 6 weeks ago, I would have said that there was no way we could even think about Will Anderson because we had no shot at him because Denver's pick wasn't going to be low enough. But honestly, it's on the table now. And it's all because of parity. That's the point I was trying to get to this whole video. I know, 18 minutes, and the point is, a lot of parity in the league right now. No one awful team to rule them all. And it's kind of cool for multiple reasons. But right now it's cool because this Broncos team, which is not a complete tire fire, because they have that good defense, could still be bad enough to get the number 1 overall pick very reasonably. All right, I'm going to get out of here. More videos later. Peace out. Go Hawks. Let me know what you think. And hey, when you're thinking about what rookies you want to get in the 2023 draft, dream big. All right? Take it from me. It might pay off. It could pay off. It's on the table.